Shalom and welcome to the One Pusik podcast, in which three rabbis from Englewood, New Jersey, each share an insight on one particular pusik from the Parsha and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Rabbi Chaim Pupko of Congregation Avat Torah, and I'm joined by my dear friends and colleagues,
Rabbi Akiva Block, Kilat Kesher,
and Rabbi Daniel Goldberg, Eitz Chaim, the Englewood Shtibel.
Before we get to our one pusik for this week's Parsha, Parshas Miketz, I want to ask you guys, how do you do presents on Hanukkah in your family? Is it like a present every night, 8 crazy nights? Is it one night of lots of presents?
We definitely do not have a present every night in my house. We like to do something special maybe in the house, an activity, something together as a family. Maybe.
Does each kid get a present?
If you expand very liberally the notion of what it means to get a present, then maybe.
Growing up, did you get presents?
Never.
on Hanukkah?
I mean, very rarely. Sometimes we went out together as a family to a show or to a movie, whatever it is, wherever it is that we went. But there was certainly no expectation that every night you get a present. I don't think there was ever even an expectation that you would get a present. It just wasn't like part of the culture in my house.
I think to most people in Englewood, that might be surprising. I think it's like a given. It's a minute, right? Hanukkah presents.
Hanukkah presents.
We got presents. We didn't get every night. It was more like you got one bigger present, not like huge.
Yeah.
Like a significant present, and then maybe a little thing here and there.
Yeah, we do one gift, and we try to do something every night. So one night we always play dreidel, and we do it with all the gelt, and we make that like a big thing. One night we always do, we call it sufganiyot making, but we really just we have like a little press for making donuts, which we like dip in chocolate and sprinkles, and the kids decorate. Those are like, we have like our set thing.
Do you like deep fry the donuts?
No, it's almost like a pancake maker. So we make the batter and you just put it in.
What night is that, Rabbi Goldberg? I got to come over.
You gotta come over. They're good if you eat them the second they come out. So you have to come over while they're out of the pan.
We got to do a sufganiyot crawl. Sufganiyot has always been culturally significant, but my sense is that over the last 10 years, the creativity and
It's a renaissance. It's a sufganiyot renaissance.
Yeah, exactly. But I wonder if the presents thing carries over to Afikomen. Did you get Afikomen presents?
As infrequently as Hanukkah presents was a thing, Afikomen was never a thing. I don't remember ever getting Afikomen present. That was not a thing in my house.
Was the Afikomen stolen and negotiated for?
It may have been. I don't remember that ever being a thing. I know it's like such a big thing in so many people's homes. Yeah. Neither of my parents were like really very very shticky. It's like not. And I love my Seder. I love my Hanukkah. It wasn't for me. The highlight of Hanukkah was us gathering around, lighting Hanukkah candles together, singing Mostur, like we're very musical. We all love to sing, so that was always a very special thing. The thing that carries over for us is we dance when we sing Haner Salalu and Mostur, so that we try to do in our house every night. So we're all a product of our upbringing. It was never a thing for me so much.
Yeah.
I have some like very memorable years, like gifts. Like I remember when my parents got us N64. That was like a game changer. So I got identity shift with like, what kind of family that has N64? Like that was like super cool.
Yeah.
You reminded me of a great story I have to tell when you're done. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I remember also one year we didn't always get Coleman gifts, but we got a joystick. Do you remember those? It was like kind of like
For the N64?
no, a joystick was for our PC. So it was like a gaming device for your PC, which was like a very big deal. I also vividly remember that.
So we had, growing up for a few years, we had a boarder, like a house guest. There was a cousin of my mother who was from Brooklyn, but was going to school out on Long Island. And he lived with us while he was in high school. And the family, as a show of gratitude, Hakar Satov each year bought the family a nice Hanukkah present.
Nice.
So the first year, I remember they bought us the previous Gilgal of the N64 was the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
And I remember this was like the biggest thing you could ever possibly imagine. I felt we were so special that we had a Super Nintendo. So maybe there is something to big, grand gifts and making your children feel special, there obviously is something to that. You want your children to feel like you love them and you want to get them the world. It was never anything that we like had all the time growing up. I remember that Super Nintendo. Wow. Oh, unbelievable.
But I think there's something special about that gift because you felt like you got this amazing gift, but you also recognize that there was an element of having deserved it, having deserved something special, right? The fact that you host someone in your home, it's like an expression of gratitude. That's like the best kind of gift.
Fascinating that Hanukkah became the time for gifts. Obviously, it seems to be a rather clear carryover from an adjacent holiday and the holiday season.
Talking about Yotes Kislev?
Exactly. But we had to say Minhag Yisrael Torahu and say that this is a lowercase m minhag. Ma inyan Hanukkah gifts. What does one thing have to do with the other? Why are we not giving gifts on Purim? Why are we not giving gifts some other time? Like, how does Hanukkah make the charitable steelman the case for giving gifts of Hanukkah as something that is native to Hanukkah per se?
My guess is that it's rooted in something with the notion of Hanukkah Gelt and playing dreidel and where those customs developed in terms of, is it part of the story that we weren't allowed to learn Torah? And so it had to look like we were doing other things. And so because of this atmosphere that was created on Hanukkah about engaging the children in a certain way, when it came to America, it was very easy for that to get translated into presents. But I think before American culture, I think it was the Gelt and the dreidel playing.
Should I tell you what I think?
Yeah.
Again, this is obviously totally after the fact, justifying a practice that I think if we were to use a word to describe the theme of Hanukkah, it's the theme of Hodah. That's what it is. So if you want to cultivate the midah of gratitude, if you want to flex the gratitude muscle, we give each other stuff. And when we give each other stuff, we actually force others to be grateful and to express that gratitude. And so the notion of gift giving is cultivating a sense of gratitude for one another. I'm grateful that you're in my life and for what you give me, not just what you're giving me today, but what you give me always. I think to be able to give to one another is actually a beautiful expression of that.
That's really beautiful. Okay, our one pasuk for this week's Parsha, Parshas Miketz, comes from Perek Membeis, Pasuk Chaf Aleph, chapter 42, verse 1. The dramatic confrontation, although I don't know if I should call it confrontation, when the brothers appear before Yosef, whom they don't know, they don't recognize is Yosef, but when they appear before Yosef and they endure all the challenges that he imposes upon them, they turn to each other in a moment of real introspection and self-reflection and humility, and they say, Vayomru ish el achiv, aval ashemim anachnu, al achinu, asher ra'inu tzaras nafsho, v'hischaneno eleinu. They said to one another, alas, we are being punished on account of our brother, because we looked on at his anguish, yet paid no heed as he pleaded with us. V'lo shamanu, al kein ba eleinu hatzara hazos. That is why this distress has come upon us. I started with the word dramatic. When you think of the dramatic encounter, you think of when Yosef reveals himself to them. But this is no less dramatic in that even though it's just going on between the brothers and doesn't involve Yosef, still, it's a very powerful moment for them to have that sudden realization. So I'm curious what you guys have to say about this.
Yeah, it's an epiphany. They're having a moment of clarity that they suddenly see how there's a broader narrative here, and it's the recognition of guilt. What's fascinating, if they don't say, Aval Hashemim anachnu al, that we're guilty for having sold Yosef down to Egypt, and presumably, as far as they know, to his death. They're not taking responsibility in this moment, or they're not grappling with the broader story. They're honing in on a particular detail, that at the moment when they put him in the pit, he pleaded with them and were cruel to him. And they didn't capitulate. They didn't take him out. They didn't listen to his pleas. And the Netziv says, perhaps the brothers, even to this moment, actually felt that what they did to Yosef was justified. They're not grappling with the guilt of having sold him and done what they did to him from a moral vantage point. They're not saying that what they did was wrong. Actually, the Netziv is saying they still feel that they were justified, but they didn't have to do it in such a cruel way. They're grappling with the cruelty, the fact that they ignored his pleas. In fact, you put this comment with what happens earlier, if you put the two together when it's happening, when the Torah is telling us the story, they actually sit down and they eat. And so he's sitting there pleading with them, please, and they're having lunch. And so what they are now dealing with is the cruelty of the manner in which they did it. And I think the broader kind of applicable lesson here is that sometimes we have to do things that are hard and we have to do things that are right, but we still have to do them in a way that shows grace and kindness. So you might have to, let's say, let someone go, firing someone. And it might be the right thing, it might be totally justified, but you can do it in a way that shows thoughtfulness and care. You might have to have a difficult conversation with a family member, and it's the right thing to do. It needs to happen, but it can be done in a way that shows graciousness and kindness, and what the brothers are struggling with.
It's a beautiful idea and beautifully applied, but the Netziv's idea still leaves me with a question, and that is, so does the Netziv really believe they were justified in throwing him into a pit? Does the Netziv believe that it was the brothers' responsibility to put Yosef in their place? I wonder what the Netziv would say was how it should have gone.
So I think the idea comes from the notion that Yosef was some kind of rodate, was somehow endangering the brothers. And it's a broader discussion.
Right.
But I suppose, that it would say that there was a way to get rid of him that was not as cruel means they.
I think you can't really read this pasuk as rich and as amazing and as full as it is without also reading Reuven's retort to them. Vaya'an Reuven osam lemor. Reuven responded to them and said, Halo amarti aletem lemor al techetu vayeled. I told you, don't sin against the boy, the child. Velo shamatem, and you didn't listen to me. V'gam damo hinei nidrash. And here's his blood. His blood is calling out to us now. I told you so. I said, don't sin against them, against the Yeled, the boy. Our first comments about how Reuven was the one who thought that this was just a naive child who was waxing poetic about the boys. The other brothers thought this was a real threat. But Reuven knew it was just naivete, youthful naivete. I told you, don't do this. But you didn't listen to me. V'gam damo hinei nidrash. It's fascinating for so many reasons, especially in response to what the brothers said just now, because they said, Ashemim anachnu, and he said, Al techetu v'yeled. So they're talking about, and he's talking about chatas, and what the difference between those two things are is fascinating. But the reason why this pasuk is also so important is because if you look back at the actual episode, Reuven said nothing of the kind. Right, what did Reuven do? Reuven said, let's not kill him. Instead, let's just throw him in a pit, right? A pit full of snakes and scorpions. The Torah says that the reason why Reuven did what he did was Laman hatziloto miyadam lahashivo al aviv. Reuven did this in order to later on go retrieve Yosef and return him to his father. But at least according to the way the Torah said it, Reuven expressed none of this to his brothers. He said, let's not kill him, let's throw him into a pit. And he says to them, I told you so, don't sin against the boy. The way Reuven's events actually unfolded versus his own self-perception of what he did is just such an incredible and important commentary on the human condition about how sometimes we interpret our own events a certain way, when in reality, the way others interpret them or the way they actually happened are completely different. And the same thing can be said about the brothers. Aval ashemim anachnu, asher ra'inu tzaras nafsho b'schano leinu v'lo shamanu. We saw his cries to us. First of all, it's here too. Here's another detail of the story that's being revealed to us here that was not told to us in real time. The Torah tells us nothing about Yosef's emotions or Yosef's reactions or Yosef's response as he's getting thrown into the pit. Only here do we see for the first time that he was crying out to his brothers and that they didn't listen. But the idea that the brothers, their self-perception of everything that happened here is that they haven't done anything wrong. And their only mistake was that they didn't have mercy on someone who was obviously guilty. Just like Reuven, who also reinterprets his actions and says, I told you so, we should save him, we shouldn't sin against him at all, when in reality, he did nothing of the kind. And we all of us, we really fall into that trap. It's a human instinct all the time. We think we've done something, but if we look a little bit closer or reflect a little bit harder, usually so often in these kinds of complex situations, what we think we've done is actually different from what we've actually done. And the way others perceive our actions might not necessarily be the way we perceive them ourselves. And maybe that's something that we're all ashemim, we're all guilty of in terms of our perception of our own self-worth and the extent to which we've been moral and ethical and done what we're supposed to do in any given situation.
I think that highlights such an important character strength, and that is self-awareness. Self-awareness is such a powerful skill, because for us to, number one, recognize that we see the world through a certain lens, and recognize that lens and our biases enables us to connect with others in more profound ways. Because if we recognize how we come across and we appreciate how other people approach things, we're able to navigate relationships and conflicts so much more effectively. Recently, I was having a conversation with somebody who was entering the rabbinate, and as I was talking things out, I came to this recognition that probably one of the most important skills for a rabbi is self-awareness.
Yeah, and one of the biggest obstacles to self-awareness, or rather maybe the key to deep self-awareness, is the recognition that our minds are these incredibly self-protecting tools, that we're always, we are great lawyers for ourselves, and we assume that we're the good guy, and the mind hates cognitive dissonance, and so it'll always make us the good guy in the rear view mirror. And so self-awareness, that the obstacle there is to like overcome my default setting, which is to assume that I did the right thing.
And Rabbi Pupko, I think your point about rabbis, I mean, you just said you were just talking to a rabbinical student, but it's so true for us. We're in the business of helping people. And we tell ourselves, if there's an email we didn't respond to, or a phone call we didn't return, or a visit we were supposed to make that we didn't make, and we all have it. We've all done it. Things that we needed to do that we didn't do. And we all have really good, legitimate, valid reasons for not doing what we've done. Sometimes maybe even because we think it's actually in that person's best interest that we didn't act when they feel that we have. And it's just important to remind ourselves not just how we perceive events as they've unfolded, but just how the other party in this particular interaction perceives those events too.
Yeah, and both can be true.
Yeah, and both often are. And had Ruvain communicated with the brothers back then about what his intentions were, had they actually had dialogue about what they should do, Ruvain went back to the pit, and we're not even told that the brothers ever knew about what Ruvain was doing at all. There was no communication at all. So yeah, I think in the work that we do, we can sometimes remind ourselves of this also.
Yeah, so you mentioned the distinction between the words chatas and asham and their different meanings. And that's actually what I wanted to focus on. Because when the brothers say, aval ashemim anachnu, we are guilty or we are ashamed, though that would be the literal translation. You can translate that literally as we are guilty or we are ashamed. And it seems like the word ashemim and ashamed are the same word. They're not linguistically connected. And Rav Shimshon Hirsch actually sharpens what ashemim means in this moment and how it's really the opposite of the English word shame. Rav Hirsch says that ashemim means not so much that we brand ourselves as guilty, that we are ashamed of ourselves. Rather, ashamed means we recognize the destructiveness of our actions. Like the word shemama, which means desolation or destruction that is caused. For Rav Hirsch, the emphasis is not on whether they are sinners or not, but rather on the consequences of their actions. And that recognition is how one takes responsibility for what they've done. The fact that they recognize what they did at this moment means that they're starting to take responsibility. How? Because when the brothers experience mistreatment by this cruel viceroy of Egypt, it generates this awakening and awareness about what they did wrong in the past. But how can that be that they're only aware now? Were they not aware these past 20 years of the severity of their crimes? Did they not see how their father Yaakov refused to be comforted, mourned constantly over the loss of his beloved Yosef because of what they did? So there's an insight in psychology developed by Brené Brown, who is a research professor in social work, a best-selling author, and she's most well known for her research on shame, on the emotion of shame. Her essential finding is basically that shame is the belief that I am bad, I am unworthy. And that kind of belief that I am bad, that paralyzes growth. If a person just sees themselves as inherently bad, it's easier to then believe, I'm not capable of doing good, I'm not capable of change. This kind of shame is paralyzing, it's unhealthy, it harms our sense of self. If it's not talked out and reframed into, I may have done something bad, but I am not bad. That's the better emotion. Rav Hirsch understands Ashemim not as we are bad, like shame, according to Brene Brown, but rather it means we must hold ourselves accountable for the destruction we caused. And perhaps the brothers couldn't gain this awareness all this time because maybe they saw themselves as inherently bad, the shame that Brene Brown defines. But now that they face this crisis, and they believe that it's a consequence of their actions, they're able to focus now not on their self-perception, but rather on the consequences of their actions. And focusing on the consequences enables them to confront those consequences and take responsibility for them. And so finally, after 20 years, instead of wallowing in shame and self-loathing, they are able to start taking steps to rectify what they've done in some way, because now they're looking at what they did, not who they are. And here, that translates into their correcting. And this is what enables them to begin correcting their mistake of abandoning Yosef by now sticking up for each other, especially Yosef's full brother, Binyamin.
I'm going to push back a little bit because with respect to Brene Brown, whose writing I love, I've never really understood or subscribed to the distinction between a person's behavior and their character.
Mm-hmm.
I've always believed that you are a product of the choices that you make. And I still remember my ninth grade teacher who gave us a thing, our first midterms, was a thing about cheating. And he said, people talk all the time about how cheating is not worth it. Cheating is worth it. If you know what you're doing, the reward far outweighs the risk. He's like, there's only one reason why you shouldn't cheat. And you don't need any other reason. Because if you cheat, you're a cheater. And while there are many people who might be okay with cheating, nobody is okay with being a cheater. And like that always resonated with me, that the choices that you make are actually what define your character. And it's hard to speak of someone who's... Now, we still yet can become good people if we are bad people. That doesn't mean we're consigned, we're condemned to being bad people forever. The notion of tshuva is exactly that point. I think that's unhealthy, to think that we can never be good again. But the mistakes that we make are who we are.
I hear what you're saying, and I definitely disagree. And I think what Brene Brown is trying to highlight is that self-perception is really important. And it's really important with regards to, there's a medrash in which that famous teaching of Rabbi Akiva is mentioned, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ze klal gadol b'Torah, that we should love our neighbor as thyself. But there's another opinion. Ben Azai argues and says that no, there's a different pasuk that's more important, and that's Ze Sefer Toldos Adam. And it's strange. Well, what is the pasuk of this is the record of the generations of humanity? So the idea is that if you love your neighbor as yourself, so then you love your neighbor relative to how you see yourself. And that's subjective. But his pasuk is teaching us that no, that each individual person has an inherent dignity. Everyone is created b'tselem Elokim. And I think it reflects this idea that how we see ourselves is critical towards how we engage others. And if we define ourselves in negative ways, that can lead to some very negative behavior.
I think it's somewhat semantics. Being created b'tselem Elokim is the innate capacity we all have to be good, that we all fundamentally wish to be good. But if you have a kleptomaniac who overcomes their desire and never steals once in their life, versus someone who at their core doesn't have an urge to steal, but succumbs in particular situations and steals, the kleptomaniac on the inside might be someone with a severe problem, a severe character deficiency. They love to steal, but it's the behavior that we care about. So I think that we all have the innate desire and will capacity to be great.
I think I agree that there might be an element of semantics. I would also say, though, that when you find these very important, very powerful psychological insights that help us understand ourselves and help us understand the world, we have to recognize that it's not going to explain all of human behavior, right? There are certain things that might be beyond the limits of what Brene Brown is teaching us. And so when you have something like a kleptomaniac or something like that, this tool may not be just the right tool, this insight. What Brene Brown is basically saying is that if someone has an overly negative self-perception, then it's hard for them to really break out of the things that they're trying to break out of because they don't see themselves in that light.
My important self-perception is not what I am, it's what I wish for myself to be. And if I can tell myself that I want to be great and I can be great, that's going to motivate me to be great.
So I think you're practicing what she says. Go back to...
but I'm not great.
I
That's the
didn't
point.
I didn't make that phone call to that person, right? Now, you can have two reactions to that. You can say, I am terrible. I'm not a reliable person. I'm not there for that person. And that's a very devastating feeling. And it really doesn't motivate most people to break out of that. Whereas, and I think you already do this, Rabbi Block, is where you say, yeah, I missed that one. I'm still someone who can be there for people and I'm going to continue to be there for people, but I missed that one. There's a big difference between saying I'm terrible versus that was a miss. I messed that one up.
And both sides have their excesses. You can be
Correct.
really self-forgiving and say, yes, I keep exhibiting this bad behavior, but that's not me. It's just because I'm in this certain scenario. But fundamentally, I'm a good guy. And you can always let yourself off the hook for bad behavior. That's the excess on the one hand. And the excess on the other hand is to feel that you're connective to your worst behavior and that you're inevitably going to repeat it. That's who I am. So it's both sides have their excesses.
Yeah, these important conversations and questions always come up around Elul and tshuva time. What should my self-perception be when I engage in the process of tshuva? And many people...
Wasn't that the difference between Slobodka and Navardik?
Right, yeah.
The Musar in Navardik was, I'm nothing. I'm dust. And the Musar of Slobodka was no, the Gadlus Adam, not the Shiflus Adam, the greatness of man. I'm capable of so many great things.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess what my concern or what gives me pause is in our self-congratulatory attitude, we escape accountability for our mistakes.
100%.
And it's just so important not when we say...
I think that's what Rabbi Goldberg's highlighting, right? The extremes.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing to you, which is you can escape accountability by saying, I'm just a cheater. Like, I'm just a bad person.
No,
I'm just not reliable. Like, God, okay. And so there's you can be
there's a defeatist attitude that
feel defeatist,
right.
And you can feel that you're fated to be this way if you feel too identified with the behavior. So you need some gap. You need some space between you and a behavior to say that we say in Slichos, v'lo shabalanu, right? Which we've sinned, v'lo shabalanu, which you could translate to mean, and it wasn't worth it. Like, these things were momentary. The other way to read it, I believe this is Rav Gifter's var, which is v'lo shabalanu, meaning it's not equal to me. It doesn't match who I am. V'lo shavet, equal. It doesn't equal me. I'm so much greater than that behavior.
When we say,
you have to have a sense of I'm more than my behavior,
right?
If you are going to create that distance for tshuva.
When we say to whether it's our students or our children or our congregants, when we say like this behavior doesn't befit you, right? This isn't you. What we mean is that we expect more of you because of the kind of person that we feel you can be, right? Because of I know you on the inside and I know what you're capable of, right?
Right.
We don't mean you haven't done this. We don't mean that because of the kind of person that you are on the inside, you are now decoupled. You are now severed from this particular mistake that you made.
Right. But we also don't mean that you're exhibiting this behavior and therefore I don't expect more from you because this is what you exhibit.
Of course not.
This is who you are.
Which is why I said to Rabbi Pupko that what the self-perception that's important is the kind of person that we wish for ourselves to be and we have the capability to be, and not the kind of person that I am. Because the kind of person that I am currently is the kind of person that has to make amends for this particular bad mistake that I did. And I think that's really what tshuva is. It's returning to the person that we wish for ourselves to be, not the person that we are.
I think we're gonna give the last word to Stuart Smalley, who reminds us to look in the mirror every day and say, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
Shkaya.
Shkoyach.
Boim biad, ram biad, mein biad, schon biad.